So it's been quite apparent to me that the gaming industry is going through quite a metamorphosis as of late. It feels like every week there's some sort of controversy, there's some sort of release that goes astray, or there's some sort of rhetoric that just puts the gaming industry as a whole in a negative light. And over this past year, I can think of countless examples, deserved and undeserved, of where this has happened. And so, what has caused this metamorphosis? Well, that depends on your worldview. Some subscribe to the idea that the failures of the gaming industry are because of the increasingly wokeification of gaming, whereas others would say, no, it's the over-commercialization of gaming. Back in the day, you'd just buy a game, but now games are filled with microtransactions, and developers intentionally just focus on how they can monetize everything. And then some say there's no crisis at all. There's always been controversy in the gaming industry. There's really no metamorphosis going on, and that people who believe that are just ignorant to the times that be and don't really know about the history of the industry itself. And obviously with that third point, I don't necessarily subscribe to that belief, as I do think there's been sort of a crisis and definitely a difference, at least in my lifetime, in how the gaming industry has conducted business and how they have presented games, and also how the games have actually turned out upon release. And look, if you're in that third group, maybe this video isn't for you, because I do and will admit maybe that is the flaw in my argument here, is I'm operating under the assumption that there is a metamorphosis, there is a vibe shift, there is change. And look, if that's your view, that's completely fine. That's okay. I'm not discrediting it at all. I respect it. There's been many times in the history of gaming that we've seen tumultuous issues come up. But for the purposes of this video, I want to talk about the present current vibe, the present current situation, and why we've seen some games really succeed and be hits, and why we've seen some just be absolute, abysmal, colossal failures. Even though this is probably not accurate, in my head, this whole vibe shift started around 2016, 2017 era, and it started with a game that I really, really loved and thought that the hatred for the game and the kind of controversy around it was completely unjustified. And that was none other than great game Battlefield 1. Really, the whole controversy boiled down to women being depicted fighting in World War I, when by and large, the vast majority of women did not fight in World War I. And I'd say people that were upset with this were saying, you know, it wasn't historically accurate. Games, we want immersion. And if you do this, it kind of kills the immersion. And on the other hand, they were arguing, well, there's already a lot of historical inaccuracies in the game anyways. And it's all about inclusion. It's all about representation. If we add women, there's really no harm to it. And obviously this goes into the more cultural examples, the social issues, where I talk about the wokeification of gaming. I feel like that would be a good example of the people who fall into that camp would point to and be like, hey, look, that was an example of the wokeification of gaming. Now, for the anti-commercialization camp, I feel like the best example I can think of, again, from EA, was Battlefront 2. So it should come to no surprise that I love these kinds of games. I love Battlefield, I love Battlefront. And when Battlefield 1 and Battlefront 2 came out sort of close in time, and thus the controversies were close in time, I was really surprised, and it really stood out to me. And it was like the first time I can remember this kind of controversies being prevalent in my mind. With the benefit of hindsight, I do think I like Battlefront 2, and I do think it's a fun game. Nonetheless, I still think Battlefront 2 is probably a great example for the anti-commercialization side, because it was an incredibly hostile payment system, and it was so bad to where state governments in the US were threatening to sue EA over their monetization model of this game. It even got so bad as to warrant the most downvoted reply, I think, in Reddit history with EA's response. And look, here's the distinction. Controversy isn't new. There's been controversy for games as far back as Halo 2, even further than that, on and on and on. I mean, Myth, I think, broke people's computers back in the 90s. There's been controversy with games. However, it feels like the metamorphosis that I'm talking about and the controversy that I'm trying to show you guys, it's like an industry-wide problem. It's not just a studio problem, or it's not just an isolated incident where a game's bad or just turns out not to be what the consumer wants. It seems like the whole industry is dealing with this together, which makes it very distinct. And a lot of the things I saw growing up, where the games would just be like, oh man, they kind of dropped the ball on this one. You know, they didn't really give us new features, or it's just kind of boring. You know, the story wasn't compelling. Stuff like that. You know, that's always going to happen. However, with this, it's, you know, you are part of the problem. Your studio is part of the problem. And there's just a lot of animus in it. There's like a lot of assumptions that people jump to. And I feel like when there's that kind of animus, it creates like this snowball of hatred. And when that is created, people just love to just pile it on and on and on until it's just massive. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And look, I didn't clickbait you guys. This is where Path of Exile 2 and Marvel Rivals comes into play. And it's because these games to me serve like a glimmer of hope for the industry. I think it shows a formula for what can succeed in today's current climate. And look, that's what makes them similar. It's not necessarily that they're similar gameplay, because they're completely different in the gameplay. One's an ARPG Diablo-like. The other, Marvel Rivals, is an Overwatch-like hero shooter third-person game, right? So they're not necessarily alike in the gameplay or anything like that. But I think why they are alike is because they're receptive. They listen to what the consumer wanted. They gave exactly what the consumer wanted without being controversial in any way. And from my preliminary research of this video, what I've noticed is there's been processes in the past where they've done controls on what can be put into the game because they want to avoid all controversy at all costs. And I think that was something that was pretty standard from what my understanding was of the entertainment industry, is whether it was a movie or a TV show or a game, they would check their notes, for lack of a better term, and ensure that they didn't have any of this like super controversial stuff, political topics, religious topics, any of that in the game. Whereas it feels like now people are trying to have that reactionary element to the entertainment. I'm not saying that's wrong, because I believe strongly in freedom of speech. I really do think that people should be able to say these things. But from a commercial standpoint, if you say that stuff in the group that maybe you've targeted with that response, maybe you're trying to convince them, maybe, I don't know what you're trying to do, whatever. There may have a negative reaction, and then you create that snowball, and then like I said earlier, it just cascades on and on and on and on and on. Because you created enemies that are going to look and pick at every little thing in the game. They're going to look for every single thing they can to make sure they can destroy this game, to make sure that this game doesn't succeed. And I think the main mistake that people make when they talk about this topic is they're like, well, they shouldn't act like that. These people shouldn't act this way. Maybe you are right. Maybe you are. But look, if that's the sword you're going to take up, if you're going to stand by that you're right, you're going to stand on that hill, you're going to die by it as well. And I think studios need to realize that and not expect their games to be a massive success when they have these things in there that can be potentially controversial. And maybe you'll say, look, Ford, maybe you're being a coward. Maybe you're not standing by us and standing up for these issues that matter. And then I'd say to that, maybe you're being unrealistic. Maybe you are the ones that need to realize, if you make a game and say, I wish everyone in the game was naked. I'm going to make a game where every character in the game is naked. And then you get the rating back and it's adult only. And because it's adult only, it doesn't make enough sales. Then why are you complaining that the game's not a success? Because you did that. You're the one who made the decision to make all the characters naked, right? So look, the point is, games like Path of Exile 2 and Marvel Rivals are taking your lunch money, Western developers. They are coming in, competing directly in the kind of games, which would be Diablo here and Overwatch 2, and they're doing exactly what those two communities have been begging for, and they're putting it in their games, and they're marketing their games without being controversial, being very neutral, and they're just winning right now. I mean, they're just beating you at your own game. And I have great optimism for Western developers and that they can turn this around. But as a consumer, I don't really care if the game's made in the East or the West. I just want to play a good game. And that's what Path of Exile 2 and Marvel Rivals delivered. And look, that's the great thing about competition from the consumer perspective, is someone's going to feel that void. When the companies are ignorant to what the community wants, maybe not even ignorant, maybe they just don't want to do it, then someone will fill that void eventually. May take years, may take decades, but someone's going to come in and they're going to take your community just like they did here with Path of Exile 2 and Marvel Rivals, and they're just going to implement exactly what the community wants, give them everything, be neutral, and just make a damn good game. And I think that's what they did here. And look, on the contrary, what I think we're not getting with a lot of Western developers lately, and what we're just not getting just in the gaming industry as a whole, is it just feels like games are being made in a conveyor belt. It's just corporate slop. It's just gray slop slapped down on our tray. A great example of this is if you go to any of the sports games right now, you'll see they're basically the same that they've always been, right? And I'm not dogging that, but because sports is sports. But right when you open up the game, it's an advertisement. They want you to buy Ultimate Team packs, or they want you to buy coins. You can't find a game now, a sports game now, that doesn't have that. Even College Football 25, you open up that game right now, you're going to get a pop-up for Ultimate Team. 100%. It feels like the video game version of processed food. Corporate fast food slop, where the profit margin is the only concern and not the quality or the overall consumer experience. Whereas Marvel Rivals and Path of Exile 2 are a home-cooked meal, crafted specifically for the consumer and with the consumer's wants specifically in mind. And I think the results of which and the general overall great reception of the two games really speaks for itself. Okay, so just to give you a quick mini review of each game, I think Path of Exile 2 is great. I know it's a beta game, and I know it's not fully complete, and I know also there's been some controversy with the game not being finished and people in the Path of Exile community being frustrated with grinding gear games over, not supporting Path of Exile 1 and going back on their promises and all that. And look, just to be very upfront, I'm not really in this community, so I don't really know anything about all that. However, what I do know is I had a damn good time playing this game. Being exposed to something new really excites me, and so having never played this genre, it was really exciting for me to be able to experience something like this for the first time. And while I've played other RPG games where you make builds, you do other similar things like explore the world, loot, I just enjoyed the new perspective and gameplay loop that playing an ARPG gives you. And look, I just felt like the game was well crafted. Every act had a specific ambiance, and every level within the act kept true to that ambiance, and you really didn't see a deviation from being immersed in the game, and I really enjoyed that. And I always enjoy the gameplay loop of going around the world, trying to loot, get better stuff, and just level up your character and become very strong at the end. And progressing through the levels really made you feel like you were getting stronger as you went on, and as you put more hours into the game. You could always go back to Act 1 if you're in Act 2 or Act 3, and go fight the enemies that you fought back to back Act 1. And it'd make you feel like a complete badass because you're just knocking through people, right? And the leveling up process was very dynamic because you could add passives to your character. You could kind of build him in a way you wanted to, whether it be more tanky, more defensive output, whatever you wanted your character to be. And this is in line with a lot of other games, but nonetheless, with this game, they did do that, and I thought they did a good job with it. And the way the passive tree was crafted, and with so many options in the passive tree, it allowed you to really be creative with how you wanted to go about your build. So overall, if I had to give the game a grade, as it stands right now guys, it's still in early access, I'd give it an A-. And maybe I am a bit biased because, this game really opened my horizons to an ARPG, and maybe I have a good reception because of that. But I think it's great. I think I had a great time with it, or I know I have a great time with it. But look, I would recommend it. I think it's really fun, and I can't wait for the full game to come out later this year and just to really dive headfirst into playing Path of Exile and really just to know more about ARPGs, just become good and acquainted with ARPGs. And if y'all have any comments and things and tips I should do on, or any more ARPGs I should play, let me know, because I think it's a genre that really has interested me. And last but not least, Marvel Rivals, man. I have spent all of my December and January just playing this game nonstop, and it's why I probably haven't released a video in a while, because I've just been locked into Marvel Rivals, grinding Marvel Rivals on and on and on and on. And what was personally nice to me is the 6v6 mode, and I know this is something that the people at the Overwatch community have been asking for, but for me personally, I liked it for a different reason, was because I could get all my friends on playing on the same team. This is something that we kind of struggled with this summer playing the finals, where there was only 3-person teams. And so it was nice to get everyone together on one team going towards another team rather than having to play a custom match and all playing against each other. And that's still fun and all that. But I did like mixing it up and having this option now for if we all want to be on the same team and all playing together. And I think the Overwatch people will say that they like the 6v6 because of the team comp and the competitive balance of the game. And you know what makes this game unique is the competitive balance. Ultimately, each hero has a team up ability with other heroes that you can match up with. And I thought that was really cool and definitely unique from Overwatch. There's nothing like that in Overwatch. And it was just kind of nice experimenting with the different characters comps and different role comps as well when going through and playing the game. And on the topic of roles, there's no role lock in Marvel Rivals. You can pick whatever character you wish. And that's very distinctive from Overwatch because in Overwatch, before you even get into a game, you have to queue up as going as a tank or you have to queue up as going as a support. And you can't change that once you are in the game. Whereas in Marvel Rivals, when you load up the game, everyone's kind of on edge because no one knows, unless you have a 6-stack, what each person's going to pick. And depending on what each person's going to pick, it's likely going to make or break the game. And this has caused a lot of frustration in the community, especially in ranked mode, because if you're running a 6-stack of DPS or no healers, or no one wants to pick tank and no one wants to run the kind of meta competitive matches, then you put your team at a very big disadvantage, and it's kind of like a throw game. And I actually think when people think it's a throw game, they just play worse and they just give up. So it's even worse of a throw game because everyone's throwing at that point. Whereas in quick play, I like not having the role lock because it allows me and my friends to just have fun and like just mess around with the game. One of the best nights we had playing this game, I'd say, was we had one of my friends run Groot and then everyone else on the team ran support. And so we were basically unkillable the whole time. And I think that whole night we lost like 2 games out of like, I don't know, 15 or something like that. And it was just like really funny and fun because no one really knew how to counter what we were doing, except the times when we lost, of course. Another aspect of the game that I think makes it very compelling and cool, especially in the world of comic books, is the art style and art design of the game. This isn't like a super like photorealistic game at all, and it isn't necessarily like a comic style game because I think it looks kind of like Fortnite. It's not like completely comic style, but it does have comic style elements in there, and I think it makes it look really cool. And I think the game is also made in the Unreal Engine, and so the game feels very smooth, and I never really saw any performance issues in the game except when there was like lag and network issues. But as far as like the actual game, I never came into anything that I thought was like super annoying or broken. And that also goes for character abilities. When I first started playing the game, I kind of thought that Jeff, the Land Shark's ultimate ability, was a little bit busted. But as I started playing, I started figuring out the counters to him. And I started figuring out other characters that have really good ultimates. Like Hela had a really good ultimate and still does, but had it really good at the start of the launch of this game. And so I experimented with that, but also started experimenting with counters to ultimates that I thought were really good. And I just found that there was strong ultimates and there were kind of weak ultimates, but there wasn't a completely busted ultimate, which really made the game feel not broken and just overwhelming to not only the casual player, but really anyone who plays the game. So one of the cons I have for Marvel Rivals is I don't think there's a lot of map diversity. And what I mean by that is it's not that each map doesn't have a different biome or different theme, because they do. And when they do it, it's really good. I really love it. But I just don't think there's a lot of maps. I wish there were more maps in the game. And that is one con I do have with the game, because it does get repetitive over time playing the same maps over and over and over. However, the maps themselves, there's nothing necessarily wrong with them. I just think they do get repetitive because they're the same. That doesn't mean that they're bad, because I actually do like the maps a lot, and I think they're logical to the game mode that they are assigned to. Because some maps will be convoy only maps and some maps will be domination maps. And I'd say that's another con. It kind of bridges into another con I have, is I don't think there's a lot of diversity of game modes, and it's kind of just a copy from Overwatch. It's like really much all we've seen from Overwatch. It's convoy, escort the convoy to the point. And there's domination, which we've seen in multiple games at this point. And I know this is a tall task, but I think I would have liked, it would have been really cool at least to see a different game mode, a completely new game mode that NetEase Games had invented. I think that would have been really cool. But as I said earlier in the video, when you do something like that, there's a lot of risk. And as a developer, you probably don't want to take that risk because of, all the backlash you may get and people kind of canceling you for adding this game mode, or the game people it's just not well received. So it is a big risk, and I think maybe that's something they can do in the future, but I do think it probably was a smart development decision and business decision to go with the two tried and true modes and cater to what fans of this genre were wanting. And so really just to put a ranking on Marvel Rivals, I'd put it in the A- and B+ range, probably B+ for me. I really love it. I've had a great time. Let's go up to A-. I'm just addicted to the game. All right. And it really gives me a lot of optimism that we as a community can continue to get results in the way we want it to go and get games that are fun. And I think ultimately money will talk, and developers from all over the world, not just Eastern versus Western developers, will respond to the consumer and will give us what we want. And I think it's a good time to be optimistic in gaming, because ultimately I think the worst is behind us. And I think what these games show is that there can be success in the modern age. There can be success in this divisive political environment we have, at least in the US and I guess in the world now. But look, I'm optimistic about gaming. These two games have made me that way, and I'm having a lot of fun, and I don't think we should doom yet about the gaming industry. And I'm looking forward to a lot of the games that are going to be released this year and that have been announced. And look, I would love to cover that for you guys. You guys can hang in there with me. I will round to it, and hopefully we can, talk about gaming together and build a good community here. So thank you guys for watching this video. Want to stay up to date on all things gaming, follow me on Twitter, hit the subscribe button down below. Thank you for watching today's video.